The Spin-Off Podcast Network.
Does your brand have something important to say through meaningful messaging that reaches the right audience? At The Spin-Off, we work closely with our partners to create bespoke campaigns that bring value to both your brand and our audience. If you're interested in learning more about partnering with us, email Beck, that's BEC, at thespinoff.co.nz.
Right now on The Spin-Off, a new cover story. Inside the urgent race to solve homelessness in Aotearoa. Some stories can't be told in 280 characters. Support The Spin-Off's long-form journalism and donate today at thespinoff.co.nz/members.
Nau mai, hoki mai, ki a The Fold, imihine, ko Duncan Greive tōku ingoa. My guest today is Kristy McGregor, who is the founder, editor, impresario behind a media brand which you may not have heard of. I'm just guessing things about the Fold audience here, that they might be inner city media type people. But I'm kind of obsessed with Shepherdess. I think that like what she has done with this brand is just like a perfect execution of a modern media brand. Shepherdess is a magazine that exists to kind of provide stories and connection to women living rurally in Aotearoa. And it came from it's a classic media founding story of, Kristy moving to New Zealand from extremely rural outback Australia and finding herself quite isolated and thinking, okay, what can I do about this? And she did what I would do, but hopefully not many other people would, which is start a magazine. And what she's done from there, I think, is the thing that's most instructive. Like there's an interesting commercial model that is less about pages and more about sort of long-term commitments from brands, but it's the fact that she has now made a linear TV show for Sky Open and a festival called The Muster, which gets women together and kind of expresses a magazine in a sort of in an event space. And she's done all that in less than 5 years, is the only full-time staffer with a distributed workforce, kind of kitchen table and spare bedroom type situation. And it's pretty extraordinary. And so I've got her on the show to tell that story about the vision, the execution, what's been hard, the kind of cliches about rural New Zealanders and where they are and aren't true. And I think it's a really interesting and impressive yarn, I have to say. So this is Kristy McGregor, founder of Shepherdess, on The Fold. Kia ora, Kristy. Welcome to The Fold.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was wondering if let's start with just a top line of what Shepherdess is.
Shepherdess is it's a magazine. It's an event. It's just become a TV series, but actually what it is it's about making people feel, particularly women living in rural areas, feel connected and feel part of something a little bit less isolated. Connected to their community. It's not a good succinct answer, is it?
No, but it's. I mean, I feel like the typical thing to say or to way to understand a media brand is through a single property, so the magazine. But the fact that you instantly go to, and it really is bigger and broader than that, was that something, that feels like a necessity in this area. You can't just sit on a single property the way you might have historically. Did you have that sort of broader scope in mind when you founded it?
No, not at all. In fact, I never even set out to have a magazine. I have no background in media, I learned how to make a magazine on a whiteboard by someone giving me a 101, saying, this is how you allocate pages, literally in a shared space in Wanganui, about 4.5 years ago, or nearly 5 years ago. So not at all. It's really just, it came from a drive of realising that my experience of moving to a farm in New Zealand was to a dairy farm in the Horowhenua was pretty isolating, and it was like, oh, what is this dairy farming lifestyle, and realising that actually the feelings I was having around isolation, that I wasn't alone. I started to talk to a lot of different women living in rural New Zealand and realised that actually, there's many other women feeling in a similar position. And it came from looking at what could we do to support that or to help them in that.
So I want to dig into those different aspects of it and the way that it's evolved shortly. But I wonder if before then we could sort of leap back to your background, your upbringing, and what sort of brought you to a place where you could start to imagine doing this as a sort of an immigrant to New Zealand, building something that feels very of this land and its people.
So I grew up actually on the edge of Sydney in a town called Camden, which is now a bit swallowed by Sydney's sprawl, and grew up with a dad who was an agriculture teacher, and going out to farms down the Jamberoo and out the Central West, and sort of from a real young age I could see that rural communities, there's a real heart, and they operate a little bit differently sometimes to, more urban areas, very high trust, and, put your butcher on the tab, when you go to the butcher or go down to the swimming pool, run into everyone, the people that you know. And I just wanted to get out of Sydney and go west. And so when most 17-year-olds are thinking about where they want to go to uni and going into the city, I decided to go to Wagga Wagga. Do you know Wagga Wagga? I
know the name.
Which is halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, and it's a big country town. And I started a social work degree down at Wagga, and then during uni holidays just went further west and found any chance I could to go out to these very outback, probably much to my mother and father's horror of all these outback adventures, and ended up working on a cattle station in the Northern Territory over a wet season, over the summer. And while I was up there, I realised that the sort of social welfare focus of the social work degree wasn't really something that was hugely resonating with me, when I could see the impact that community development could have in, this was in particularly isolated Aboriginal communities up there. And just when you give people the power to make their own decisions and influence their own future and pathways, I think that's incredibly powerful space and agency. So I dropped out of uni, dropped out of face-to-face uni, and ended up on another cattle station in Western Queensland, and I was governessing, which is an incredibly posh-sounding term for 4 boys, but I can guarantee you it wasn't anything posh. So it's teaching these children through School of the Air. We were 8 hours drive from a town of 2,000 people, 220 k's from the nearest town of 30 people on a good day, as the publican described it to me once. And, this is a place where you get your mail once a week on a mail plane, and your stores come on a train, and then a collection by a horse truck every 4 months. So it's pretty isolated. 2.2 million acre property. Yeah, and it was while I was there that I started to see very social community over there, despite the isolation geographically. But I realised we'd go to these social events and the women would always be taking the baking, running the bar, and quite frankly, the blokes would be standing around, having a good time, having a drink and, being merry. And I was like, when do these women get a break? And that sort of led to an event that I started over there back in 2012.
So you come to New Zealand when you've described that sense of social isolation. Why was a sort of a magazine the path you chose to kind of sort of start to break that sense and build that kind of network and community for other women who might be feeling a similar kind of way? Yeah,
so I met a dairy farmer from Levin, as you do in Western Queensland, and ended up, he was coming back, his 5th generation on his family farm, coming to sort of take on the farm here. And so I moved over and got this immersion of what dairy farming life was like, which was sort of like 14-hour days, come home, have a feed, fall asleep on the couch, repeat, and just do that every day. I was like, what is this? And I always have, you find in your life these funny things where there's these threads and you don't sometimes know what they mean at some point, and then it's like, oh, that's what that means. So I'd always been like an avid collector of magazines and like read the newspaper. I find that picking up a newspaper is a connection with community. We'd get the mail plane to that station once a week, and you'd dive into the newspaper to look at the town and country section to see who you knew, or what was happening, and sort of catch up on the sort of goings on. And I'd met a publisher of a magazine in Australia, and we'd got chatting about New Zealand and not having something that we could see quite like this for the rural space. I think there is very strong sort of local papers in different areas, but there wasn't really something sort of speaking to that social aspect in a more regional or national capacity. So, the idea came about. It started to create a magazine, but as these things, often you need to be low cost and agile and, at the start. So literally the start of it was setting up an Instagram page and starting to share stories from women on farms and living rurally in New Zealand. Just very, send us your photos off your phone and, here's me having a go writing something, very basic. And that was for a year that we did that while we were getting ready to launch the print mag. Yeah.
So there's a kind of, I feel like there's a popular understanding, which certainly in my experience isn't accurate, of the world of magazine publishing that's very sort of Devil Wears Prada, very urban, very kind of sophisticated. But even the publications I've worked on have been in cities, and you have been in kind of the sort of Ponsonby 500 cliche. Obviously, I'm assuming that's not the case. Can you describe for me how Shepherdess is made, who makes it, and how?
Yeah, so literally, started pretty much from the kitchen table in our house on the farm, old homestead. And now we have a team, so it's very much built over the last 4.5 years, or 19th edition that just came out. Now we have a team that are spread all around New Zealand. So we have one of our teams in the Chatham Islands through to Greer does our finances and raising her kids there, farming, and then through to team members in the Bay of Plenty. We have team members in Lauder, in Kingston, literally sort of Blenheim, right across both North and South Islands. And very much, so we're all working remotely. Everything's done, over Slack and Asana and Dropbox and emails. And it's interesting you say that about the sort of culture in magazines, because my perception probably was also pretty daunting of, the magazine world being like that. But actually I found the fellow magazine publishers hugely supportive and very giving of time and energy and things like that. So I know that's on a different sort of level with it, but the perception of that sort of cutthroat hasn't been what I've seen of it, but maybe I'm in my own little bubble.
Well, when you create a category, you're sort of not really competing with anything like the same way, potentially.
Yeah, maybe.
So in terms of the, finding contributors and finding stories, how would you sort of describe what makes you go, oh, this is a Shepherdess story, and the kind of how is the kind of scope of the magazine kind of cohered over time? Yeah.
So I guess in terms of where the story ideas come from, because we have this wonderful team of 11 or 12 of us that are based all around the country, then they're all embedded in their communities, and they're just day-to-day seeing wonderful things going on and, putting ideas forward. And then we have a team of freelance writers and photographers who are also embedded in their rural communities right across both islands as well. So we get a lot of ideas through those networks. And then our community is so engaged and always sending ideas in or, contributing. So through social media, or through emails or even letters, people share story ideas. I guess in terms of what we're looking for in a story or sort of where I see the scope, I kind of think of Shepherdess as being for anyone in provincial New Zealand. And to me that, dare I say it, is sort of anything outside of Auckland or Wellington. But I also think it's for people that are rural and rural at heart. And there's often a lot of folks that might be living in a more, urban setting, but actually grew up on a farm or have an uncle or auntie that ran the farm or want to get back to the farm. So, I think, or have this romanticised idea of what farm life is like, I think what we do is try to be, yes, there are obviously these joys of rural life, which when you're living rurally you get to experience, but there's also challenges, as I sort of touched on earlier. It's not all roses, so trying to tell stories in a way that are authentic and relatable and represent what rural life or life in the provinces is like. Yeah.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spinoff. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBit.
There's these two competing, there's probably more than two, but certainly when you live in the city, there's these two competing narratives around what rural people, rural life, or rural culture is. And one is a sort of a very bucolic country calendar type, thing that you have kind of nodded at already. But then there's also this kind of groundswell, sort of like an angry kind of like get out of our kind of communities type version that feel on some level incompatible with one another, even though I'm sure that they both exist. That what Shepherdess expresses feels like it's very much trying to figure out how to phrase this in a way that is fair to both parties. Like it feels like it comes more from that place of community, and it feels kind of almost liberal coded when rural life or provincial life can be kind of, the cliche is it's deep blue, kind of fairly conservative. Are those two conceptions accurate, and how does sort of Shepherdess navigate any tension that might exist between those two worlds?
Yeah, I guess how we've sort of approached it is by like looking at the person and personal story, and giving people a voice to share their personal experiences, because everyone has a story to tell. And, I think we're not interested in, well, I'm not interested in, the celebrity or the award winner necessarily, or the, having had to climb Mount Everest, or, to deserve a, feature, but actually like, I hope that when you pick it up, you're seeing the story that you can relate to of your neighbour or your mum or your sister or, whānau. So I think if you, recognising that everyone has an experience, and it's their lens that they've, had that experience and seen it through, and that's legitimate. I guess that's probably like how we've sort of approached it. And I think too that one thing that also was a driver for me, I think New Zealanders are very modest and sort of quietly spoken. And if you go into rural communities, there's this wealth of good things happening. There's so many incredible community initiatives or places or businesses, but it's not really spoken about. And sometimes then I think in a more mainstream media, those sort of clashes can be what we see as headlines, or what we see as, the narrative, when actually if you're out there. And so I like to think that we're sort of bringing a bit of shining a light on some of those really positive things that are happening, perhaps more quietly.
So, I'm not like, I sort of accept that there's a lot that we don't see, a lot that is community driven, but there is also a kind of a bit of a shadow that falls across it and that can manifest itself in quite an intense and reactionary way against some of what it is you're trying to convey. And at times that has actually kind of visited upon you. Do you want to just talk about that there was a specific incident, I think it was earlier this year, right, that you went through? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we were the subject of a column in a newspaper that called us a glossy Women's Day, so I don't think they'd picked up the mag.
Just to be clear for listeners at home, it's many things, but it's definitively matte.
Embossed, yeah. But no, actually it was a really interesting experience because for that one bit of ill-informed maliciousness, really, there was the most huge upswell of support. I knew that we had a great community and could feel that, but I didn't realise the scope of that community and actually how that transcended rural community to urban to, so the kind of folks that got in touch after that and said, please keep doing what you're doing, or, it was really quite incredible. I mean, I think that those kind of comments are not isolated, that we were on the back, given or chucked at that time. There are sections of our community that are sexist and racist and, all those not so good or not good things. And, people have to put up with that every day in their day-to-day life. And I think what we try and do at Shepherdess is bringing voice to stories that counter that, I guess, through showing beauty and showing, positivity and things. So, while I wouldn't say that our stories are political in a explicit sense, I hope that what we're trying to do by making people feel seen and feel heard, whether that's young women, whether that's older women, whether that's Māori women, Pacifica women, but giving voice and giving sort of light. I think one actually example of that was we had a conversation the other day with someone, and her husband is very outspoken and sort of often in media, and we sat down and we talked to her, and it was I got off the call and I was like, wow, like that's pretty powerful. She's getting a chance to be the spokesperson or to speak her life and her truth and her, when often she's probably in the shadow of, or not in the shadow, but, he's the one out there. So I think just giving women a space where they can have their voices heard is quite powerful.
In terms of the sort of evolution of it, and you noted at the start, it's become a TV series and an event. Do you want to sort of talk about those in turn?
Yeah, so the TV series, I guess, came along an opportunity and sort of, like these things are 2 years in the making before it, came onto screens. That was an opportunity really to share the stories that we tell in the magazine, but in a cinematic format, and ran on Sky Open at the end of last year. So we visited 6 communities. So from Tokanui in the South Island, or Deep South, through to Upper Moteri, Parongaho, Tora, and Kurau and Ofa, and spent time with 3 women in each community, and just sort of capturing that daily life. And also, I think probably a little bit different to maybe what's out there at the moment, but actually like rural women are not just one-dimensional, but they're wearing all these different hats. And so through the television series, we were able to sort of follow them, across their week and see, all the different roles that they take on as mothers, or, in their business, or, whatever they might be doing. So, yeah, I guess it's sort of, for us as going, that television first season was a chance to, bring those stories in a different way, but sort of retaining that, I guess, ethos around authenticity and quality and things like that. And then the Shepherdess muster, which we ran in February for the first time, was nearly 4 years in the making, with a few setbacks, including Cyclone Gabrielle that swept through last year, 3 days out from the event.
Wow.
But I couldn't cry at the time because there was obviously so much devastation and, people suffering in many worse ways. So, but yeah, we persevered, and we did it in February in the little village of Motu in Tairāwhiti. And have you been to Motu before?
I have not. Tell me about it.
It's like it's just got a school. When we started planning, there were 7 students at the school, and a community house, which was the old post office, which the community use now as a community gathering space that they run. And we transformed the school for 3 days into a hive of activity of nearly 300 women from all across the country, for a sex therapist, Jo Robertson, for arts, a mural with an incredible mural artist, all sorts of arts activities, burlesque, dancing, good food, you name it. Yeah, sort of an event that's based around really 3 pillars of health and wellbeing, the arts, and business development, entrepreneurship. Yeah, which is sort of really, at the end of the day, I think of it as social and emotional wellbeing. But if you say to someone, come and have a weekend for your social and emotional wellbeing, they'll run a mile, So you don't say that. You say, come for all these fun things. But that's really what it's about, is giving women a chance to get off farm or away from the kids and, do something for themselves.
Yeah. So with this kind of, really quite well built out Shepherdess universe, which, it is just an extraordinary thing to have done from a standing start without experience, but it's also instructive about, as I mentioned before, what you have to do to, both the possibility of and the reality of trying to build out a sort of solid financial foundation for a media brand in this era. What's the sort of commercial model that makes it work, and does it feel like it's kind of stable, sustainable for you now?
Yeah, it's, so I guess the event is, in terms of funding or revenue, is around sponsorship, grant funding, and also ticket sales. So that's sort of the main revenue streams for the muster. For the magazine, we have partners who come on and commit, for an annual period, obviously advertising, and then subscriptions and retail. Our subscriptions are the highest that they've been all so far, and, keep going up, which is great, and that's what we want, because, at the end of the day, like, subscriber revenue allows you to find and tell those good stories, and you need that because that's what you want to be doing, is uncovering those diverse and lesser known, that's really important for us too, is that diversity of stories culturally and age wise, etc. Yeah, so I guess we've sort of taken the diversity in revenue streams, I guess, across many of these different areas, and I think it's something that we're 4.5 years in now in terms of that, and just keeping on making that stronger. And I think the thing I love about the magazine is, and you probably, the same in media, is like the agility that you can have. So, you've got like every quarter we're putting out a new publication, and when you're running your own like small business too, you're like going constantly, what's working, what's not, what do we need to change up? And, it's like constant tweaks or refinements. So I think we've got the sort of a model there, and we can constantly polish. You're constantly polishing that. Like there's never perfection,
It's weird. Like I feel like for some people that would be an exhausting idea, but for you, but it feels like it's giving you a kind of an energy and an excitement about it. Do you see this as something which is your life's work, and that you're, does that fill you with excitement, or is it this something you're doing for some seasons and we'll eventually find someone else to kind of take the load of it?
Oh, I feel like I've like found something that just really excites me, and how wonderful to get to work on. Like this is like a dream sort of job, if you like, to be able to work on something that's so much fun and diversity, and all these cool things that we get to do day to day. So yeah, I feel like it's it's not really a job. It's and when you're running your own, steering the ship of there's no 9 to 5. It's whatever hours, whenever, on any of the 7 days, much like farming, eh? But yeah, so yeah, it feels, and just to be almost like that isolation that I felt when I first moved to the farm. It's kind of this strange coming around full circle thing where, like, I don't feel like that anymore because I've got this wonderful network of women that I work with day to day, and then getting to meet and expose to, all through all the different projects we're doing. So I felt like almost there's this community that I've built around me, or that's emerged.
Well, it's a beautiful thing, and thanks so much for coming on the fold and just explaining I don't know, it's a really singular and specific thing you built, so well done.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Greive, founder of The Spinoff. You can help us keep all of The Spinoff's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora, this is Toby Manhire, here to urge you to tune in to Gone by Lunchtime, a podcast with me, Annabelle Lee Mather and Ben Thomas, tackling the world of New Zealand politics, from policy to polling, from scandal to psychodrama. Listen to Gone by Lunchtime, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network, wherever good pods are sold.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.